How's it going, guys? I'm Robert from Machado Visuals, and I recently bought a new cinema camera. Now, before I get into it, I want to preface this by saying that the camera is just a tool, and my goal isn't to just woo you with another camera video supplemented with cinematic B-roll. That's not what this is about. My goal is to dive into the rationale that goes behind such a massive investment and some things that you might want to consider if you're thinking about upgrading to a cinema camera. That all being said, this is the camera system I ultimately decided to go with. Wait, is that a red? All right, so if you've been following me on Instagram, you'll know that I recently pulled the trigger on an Alexa Mini LF. So the first question is, why? Why did I decide to jump into ARRI's ecosystem as opposed to some of the newer systems such as the Sony Venice 2 or v-raptor? Well, first of all, I really love the ergonomic design of the original Mini, or any other Alexa for that matter, and the Mini LF just expands upon that. It's effectively just a box, so you can make it as big or as small as you need it to be. I've always been a fan of the Alexa's color science, and ARRI's German engineering is damn near impeccable. From the camera menus down to the literal nuts and bolts that rig the camera, everything is just really well thought out. You don't need to constantly black shade, sound isn't dealing with a jet engine on set, there are built-in NDs, there's just something to be said about ARRI ergonomics and how everything just works. Now don't get me wrong, I'm a firm believer that cameras should be chosen on a job-per-job basis, and I certainly don't expect to shoot with this camera full-time. I'll gladly use any camera you throw in my hand so long as it suits the job, but the Alexa consistently checks the most amount of boxes for me. Most of you know that I own a plethora of cameras, and that's not just because I've gear acquisition syndrome. It's so that I can basically cater to any size budget. Again, going back to the idea of using the right tool for the job. One of the biggest factors that went into this decision was the market. In Las Vegas, I believe there are only 2 Mini LFs available, and they are both owned by the same person. Even in terms of regular Minis, I would estimate there are probably less than 5 available in the whole city. I get gear requests for ARRI about once every few weeks, usually for commercials or in town or even dock work, and that would be a pretty significant source of rental income, even when I'm not going out with a camera. I also felt like the Mini LF was finally at a feasible point from an owner-operator perspective with the latest firmware update, which adds great Super 35 modes and essentially turns it into a regular Alexa Mini. When it was first released, it was a much harder sell because it was basically only capturing large format, which really limited your lens selection. The new Super 35 modes are great for when people are looking to match to other Alexas and other multiple cameras. Sure, there will still be a difference in terms of depth of field and available frame rates, but this, in my opinion, isn't enough of a deal breaker to dissuade people from renting an extra body should they need it. All right, so then why didn't I just go with a regular Alexa Mini? I really wanted to jump into this system since a lot of the newer parts found on the LF were going to be used in future ARRI cameras, such as the EVF and the new media. The new EVF has a beautiful OLED screen, and the flip-out 4-inch monitor looks fantastic as well. The new codecs drives are blazing fast, and a full 1 terabyte drive can dump within 15 minutes. They're definitely expensive, but when you consider the speed and the capacity, you're getting a lot more for your money when compared to something like a Mini Mag, which is basically a generic SSD that's a fraction of the speed. I really didn't want to invest in a set of CFast cards towards the end of their life cycle, and since ARRI will be using them in future cameras, it'll be easier to use them interchangeably once the newer Alexas are in town. Sure, but why didn't I wait until the new Super 35 camera that ARRI's going to release? Well, I really do enjoy the language and intimacy of large format and the way that the wider field of view helps with creating a sense of depth through perspective. That was actually one of the many reasons I picked up a set of Vista Prime several years ago, because at the time, I didn't know what camera system I'd eventually be shooting on. Turns out my intuition was correct. Now, to be clear, I don't think large format is the new gold standard and will just Thanos snap Super 35 acquisition away, but I figured it made a little bit more sense getting into a system that paired nicely with equipment that I already own, since they're capable of capturing large format. That being said, I don't think large format is for everything because it has a level of brilliance and fidelity that may not be appropriate for every project. Like I mentioned earlier, I can always dumb down the camera to capture a Super 35 image circle, but I'll still always have an inherent difference in depth of field, which might require a slight difference in lighting if I want to match. At the end of the day, it was just really good timing, and I felt very prepared for something like an Alexa. I've been focused on buying quality equipment for the past few years and building the proper infrastructure to even support a cinema camera of this caliber. Oftentimes I see a lot of owner ops buying cinema cameras, but they'll have 1 or 2 batteries, or they'll buy the latest red camera and just throw it on a tiny Manfrotto. That's cool and all, but in my opinion, isn't enough to sustain a proper workflow. Don't get me wrong, I understand that we all start somewhere, and I'm by no means bashing people that have been in this situation, but I do think it's important to consider these kinds of surrounding factors that go into any kind of camera purchase. Hopefully this video is helpful in some way. Should DPs own gear, and does anyone really need to own an Alexa Mini LF? Probably not. But when you factor it from a business perspective, things start to make a little bit more sense. Am I expecting to get a ton of jobs now that I own an Arri? No. Will I be putting it in my Instagram bio? Absolutely not. I'll still be holding on to my Sony cameras because they're all just different tools that serve different purposes. Shout out to John and the folks over at TLD for letting me hang for a few days and actually letting me build their camera package. He actually produced the music featured in this video, so be sure to give some love over to Jonathan and Friends on Spotify or Apple Music. If you have any questions on this camera or anything else I talked about in this video, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.